Orion Foster's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the lens on his second-hand camera, trying to balance it with one arm while steadying his 5-year-old daughter, Piper, with the other. The beach was glowing under the late afternoon sun, and the waves crashed in the background like a soft drumbeat. He wasn't here on vacation, he couldn't afford one. He was hustling, offering $10 photos to tourists while watching Piper chase seagulls barefoot in the sand. He turned when a voice called softly, "Could you take one for me?" She stood at the edge of the boardwalk, framed by tall beach grass and golden light. Her sundress fluttered in the breeze, and her dark hair shimmered like it had been spun from the ocean itself. She didn't look like a local. Her posture was too straight, her sunglasses too expensive, her sandals too clean. But she smiled like she hadn't had a real one in a while. "Sure," Orion said, lifting the camera. "Just stand where the sun hits your left side." She walked barefoot through the sand, her movements graceful but careful, like she wasn't used to walking without heels. When she reached the spot, she turned to face him. "That good?" she asked. Orion nodded, snapping a few shots. "You look like a perfume commercial." She laughed, and his chest tightened. It was the kind of laugh that made you forget the world was heavy. "What do you charge?" she asked, walking back toward him. $10, Orion said, tugging Piper gently behind him as she returned. The woman looked down at Piper, who was clutching a small seashell. "Hi, sweetheart, that's a beautiful shell." Piper blinked up at her. "It's for our wish jar. Daddy says wishes are free." The woman crouched beside her. "Then I hope all yours come true." Orion handed her the old Polaroid. She looked at it, and something shifted in her face like the wind had knocked something loose inside her. "You're really good," she said quietly. "Thanks," Orion replied. "I used to do wedding photography before everything changed." She hesitated. "I'm Fallon Everett." Orion offered his hand. "Orion, and this is Piper." Fallon shook both their hands. "Well, Orion, I think you just gave me the best photo I've had in years." She tucked the Polaroid into her bag and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "No, that's," Orion started. "I insist," she interrupted, not giving him a chance to argue. "You didn't just take a photo. You reminded me what life feels like." Orion blinked, stunned. "Are you sure?" Fallon smiled. "Positive." He didn't know it yet, but Fallon Everett wasn't just any woman on the beach. She was the CEO of Everett and Chase Enterprises, one of the most powerful media conglomerates on the East Coast. But right now, she was just a woman who had spent the last 3 years in meetings, boardrooms, and empty hotel suites, and who had suddenly remembered what it felt like to be seen. "Do you two live around here?" she asked. "Just a few blocks up," Orion said. "We rent a room over a bakery." "It's small, but it smells good at night," Fallon chuckled. "I'd imagine it does." Piper tugged at Orion's hand. "Can we go back to the shells?" "In a minute, baby," he said gently. Fallon glanced out at the sea. "Would you mind taking one more with me in it?" "And Piper too?" Orion looked surprised. "You want a photo with her?" "She reminds me of someone I used to be," Fallon said softly. Piper smiled wide and ran over to Fallon, who lifted her with ease. Orion lifted the camera again and took the photo. Time froze for a second, the wind, the light, the way Fallon looked at Piper like she'd known her forever. Afterward, Fallon handed Piper the new photo. "That one's for your wish jar." Piper studied it and whispered, "You look like a princess." Fallon's voice caught. "I used to want to be one." Orion watched her carefully. There was something behind her eyes, something sad, but he didn't pry. He just stood there, letting the silence settle. "I'm in town for a few weeks," Fallon said, brushing sand off her dress. "If you ever want to grab coffee or, I don't know, talk about photography or life." "Here," she handed him a card. It was thick, embossed, and definitely expensive. He glanced at it. "Fallon Everett," he read. "Everett, wait." Fallon shrugged with a faint smile. "Yeah, that Everett," Orion blinked. "You're a CEO, guilty. And you're here on this beach asking me for coffee. Why not?" she said simply. "You seem like the kind of person who knows what matters." He looked down at Piper, who was still clutching the photo like a treasure. "I just know what I've got to protect." Fallon's eyes softened. "That's what I mean." He hesitated. "You really want coffee with a broke single dad and a 5-year-old who thinks sand is edible?" "I do," she said without hesitation. "And maybe dinner if you're up for it." Orion wasn't used to women like her. He wasn't used to women at all lately, but something about Fallon made him feel steady, like maybe his life wasn't just about surviving anymore. "I'll think about it," he said with a crooked grin. "But I'm warning you, Piper picks the place and she's got a thing for pancakes." Fallon smiled again, this time wider. "Then I'll see you at the pancake house." As she walked away, her dress dancing in the wind, Piper tugged his sleeve. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby, she's really pretty." He looked out at Fallon and nodded. "Yeah, she is." And for the first time in a long time, Orion felt something he hadn't felt in years' hope. The bell above the door jingled as Orion stepped into the small pancake diner 3 blocks from the beach, Piper perched on his hip with her arms looped sleepily around his neck. The place was warm and smelled like maple syrup and cinnamon. Booths were packed with locals, and the floor tiles were chipped from years of shuffling feet. It wasn't fancy, but Piper loved it because the waitress always gave her extra whipped cream without asking. Fallon was already seated in the corner booth, a menu untouched in front of her, her blazer folded neatly beside her. She looked up as they entered, eyes catching Orion's first, then softening when she saw Piper nestled against him. "You made it," she said, rising slightly. Orion nodded and slid into the booth, settling Piper beside him. She fell asleep on the walkover, too much sand and sunshine. Fallon reached across the table and tapped the edge of Piper's pancake plate. "Then I'll make sure she gets the fluffiest stack in town." Orion raised an eyebrow. "You've got pancake connections." "I may have whispered sweet nothings to the cook on my way in," she said, lips twitching with amusement. He leaned back, arms folded. "You always charm your way through life," her gaze didn't waver. "Only when I'm not bulldozing through it." Piper stirred, rubbing her eyes and sitting up. She blinked at Fallon, then grinned when she saw the whipped cream mountain on her plate. "You remembered," she squealed. Fallon winked. "I have an excellent memory." Orion watched the interaction quietly, something stirring in him as he poured syrup over Piper's plate. "You don't seem like someone who does this kind of thing often." Fallon tilted her head. "What kind of thing?" "Breakfast with strangers." "Letting kids climb into your personal space." She picked up her fork. "You're not strangers anymore," he studied her. "Why here? Why now?" Her expression shifted, not sad but heavy. "I was supposed to be in a meeting this morning. Something about international licensing rights and projected revenue margins, but I looked at my calendar, and I just couldn't walk into another glass tower." Orion didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was honest. "I used to come to this beach when I was a kid," she continued. "My mom would bring me here every summer before things got complicated." He didn't push, he just nodded once. "Being back here," she said, "I thought maybe I'd find something I lost along the way." "You think you have?" he asked. She looked at Piper, who was humming as she licked whipped cream from her spoon. "Maybe, I know it's strange, but yesterday felt real. I forgot what that was like." Orion exhaled slowly, then picked up his coffee. "You ever forget what it's like to not worry about money?" Fallon's eyes met his, and for the first time the power behind them dimmed. "Yes, but for different reasons." Piper tapped her fork against the table. "Daddy says we don't need lots of money to be happy." Fallon smiled. "He's a wise man." "He also says pancakes are better than people," Piper added seriously. Orion groaned. "I said that once, one time, when our neighbor kept stealing our laundry quarters." Fallon laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "Well, he's not wrong." The waitress dropped off more syrup and a plate of hash browns. Fallon reached for her fork, then paused. "You know, I don't remember the last time I ate breakfast without checking my email between bites." Orion gestured toward her phone, which sat untouched beside her. "You've been clean for over 30 minutes. I'm impressed." "Don't jinx it." They ate in companionable quiet for a while, Piper occasionally offering Fallon bites of her pancake, which Fallon accepted with enthusiasm. Orion watched, his chest tightening at the way Fallon interacted with his daughter, not out of obligation, but with genuine affection. It wasn't something he saw often, and never from someone like her. As they finished, Fallon wiped her hands and leaned forward. "I have a proposition." Orion narrowed his eyes. "That sounds dangerous. Not illegal, I promise." "I don't trust people who say that upfront." She ignored him and continued. "My company is launching a community feature series, stories about real people, real lives." Not the usual polished nonsense. I want to produce a short feature on you. He froze, fork midair. Me, you, a single dad hustling, making art, raising a kind-hearted kid. It's everything the brand needs to remember who it's supposed to serve. He set his fork down. You want to make me some kind of poster child? No, she said gently. I want to tell your story on your terms. And you just happened to find me on the beach. I didn't plan it, but I'm not walking away from it either. He leaned back, arms crossing. What's the catch? There's no catch. You'd be paid, of course, well compensated, and you'd have control over what's shared. I just want a chance to show people something real. Piper looked between them. Will I be on TV? Fallon smiled. Only if you want to be. Orion was quiet for a moment, then looked at Fallon. Why me? Because you reminded me that not all stories need to be about power. Some of them just need to be about love. He stared at her, something shifting in his chest. You always talk like you're pitching a movie, she laughed. I've been in boardrooms too long. He glanced at Piper, then back at Fallon. Let me think about it. Of course, she said, sliding a business card across the table. No pressure. Just pancakes and possibilities. As they stood to leave, Fallon knelt beside Piper and pressed something into her hand. For your wish jar. Piper opened her fingers to reveal a tiny silver pendant shaped like a star. Orion's voice caught. You didn't have to, I wanted to. Piper beamed. Now I can wish for two things. Fallon stood and met Orion's eyes. I hope one of them comes true. She turned and walked out into the sunlight, her steps steady and certain. Orion watched her go, heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. Piper tugged his sleeve. Daddy? Yeah, I think I want to be her when I grow up. He looked at the door, then down at Piper. Me too, kid, he murmured. Me too. Orion adjusted the collar of the only button-down shirt he owned as he stepped into the sunlit atrium of Everett and Chase's downtown studio space. The building's glass facade towered above him, reflecting clouds across its surface like a painting. Piper's small fingers tightened around his hand, her eyes wide as they took in the high ceilings and hanging greenery inside. She said we'd meet in the back garden, he murmured, scanning the directory while trying not to gawk at the marble floors or the art installations lining the walls. A young man in a tailored vest approached. You must be Orion and Piper. He extended a hand. I'm Ellie, Miss Everett's assistant. She's waiting for you outside. Piper looked up at Ellie. Is the garden magic? He grinned. Some say it is. They followed him through a corridor that opened into a secluded rooftop terrace filled with flowering vines, carved stone benches, and a gentle waterfall trickling into a koi pond. Fallon stood near the edge, her heels abandoned beside her as she walked barefoot across the grass, phone tucked away and expression unguarded. I was starting to think you'd changed your mind, she said as she turned. I almost did, Orion admitted. I'm glad you didn't. Piper broke from his side and darted toward a cluster of wind chimes dancing in the breeze. Fallon watched her for a moment before turning back to Orion. I'm not used to inviting people into this part of my life, she said. Most people only ever make it to the lobby. I'm not used to being invited anywhere with glass walls and koi fish, Orion replied. She laughed. I almost forgot how refreshing honesty is. He studied her. So what exactly do you want from me today? I want you to tell me the truth, she said simply. About who you are, what you've been through, and what you dream about at night when everything's quiet. Orion looked away, jaw tightening. That's more than most people ask. I'm not most people, she stepped closer. And I think you stopped being just someone I met on the beach a while ago. He didn't respond right away. Piper knelt near the pond, whispering to the fish like they were old friends. Orion's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. Before Piper was born, I thought I had it all figured out. I was a wedding photographer in Chicago, had a partner, a plan, a future. Then she got sick, and everything I thought I knew about life cracked open. Fallon didn't speak. She just listened. I stopped taking jobs, sold my gear to pay hospital bills, moved back here because it was the only place that didn't remind me of losing her. I've been trying to keep Piper's world bright ever since, even when mine feels like it's barely lit. Fallon's voice was soft. You never told me about her mother. I didn't want pity, still don't. I don't pity you, she said. I admire you. He met her gaze, uncertain. You admire a man who can't afford a second pair of shoes for his kid. I admire a man who shows up every day, even when it's hard." She took a step closer, her bare feet brushing the edge of his. "Do you know what it's like to be surrounded by everything and feel like you have nothing?" He frowned. "You have more than most people on this planet. And yet, I've never had a real conversation without checking my reflection first. Never had someone look at me without calculating what I can do for them. I'm not trying to get anything from you," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. "That's why this scares me." They stood there, the hum of wind chimes and distant traffic filling the silence between them. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "This is the production outline for the story," she said, "but that's not why I wanted you to come today." He took the paper but didn't look at it. "Then why?" "Because I want to know what it feels like to have lunch with someone who makes me laugh without reminding me of my net worth. I can't promise lunch will be gourmet." "I packed peanut butter and jelly." "That sounds perfect." They sat on the grass while Piper counted koi and narrated their imaginary adventures. Orion pulled out the sandwiches, wrapped in wax paper, and handed one to Fallon. "No crusts," she said with a smile. "I'm impressed. Only way she'll eat them." They ate in companionable quiet for a while before she leaned back on her elbows and looked up at the sky. "My father never brought me to places like this," she said. "He thought gardens were a waste of space. Said time was better spent in boardrooms. You built one anyway." "I needed somewhere to breathe," Orion nodded. "Do you ever wish you could disappear? Just take off and live somewhere no one knows your name." Her eyes didn't leave the sky. "Every day." "Then why don't you?" "Because I'm afraid I'll forget who I used to be if I let go of who I am now." He considered that. "Then maybe you need someone to remind you." Their eyes locked again, and something shifted, subtle but real. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was recognition. Piper ran over, holding a small flower she'd picked from the edge of the garden. "For you," she said, offering it to Fallon. Fallon accepted it like it was made of diamonds. "It's beautiful, thank you. Daddy says flowers are like people. Some grow faster than others, but they all need the sun." Fallon looked at Orion. "She's wiser than both of us. She's been through more than a 5-year-old should." They helped clean up the lunch, and as they stood, Fallon hesitated. "Would you come to the gala next week?" she asked. "It's a charity event. There'll be photographers and press, but I'd like you there, with Piper." "I don't exactly own a tux. I'll take care of that." He hesitated. "Why does it matter if I'm there?" "Because I want them to see what I see when I look at you." He studied her face, then nodded. "All right, but only if Piper picks the dress code." Fallon smiled. "Then I better prepare for glitter and sequins." As they walked back through the building, Piper skipping ahead, Fallon reached out and gently laced her fingers through Orion's. He looked down at their joined hands but didn't pull away. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. The ballroom shimmered with candlelight and crystal. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, and a string quartet played something elegant that drifted like silk through the air. Waiters in white gloves moved silently between tables, offering trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Every guest was dressed like they belonged in a movie, except for the man standing just inside the entrance, holding his daughter's hand and scanning the crowd like he was trying to memorize every exit. Orion adjusted the unfamiliar jacket Fallon had sent over that morning. It had arrived in a black garment bag hung carefully on his door with a handwritten note. "Wear this. Trust me." Piper had twirled in her new dress for nearly an hour before they left, the pale blue tulle making her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale. "Is it okay if I'm nervous?" Orion asked quietly. Piper looked up at him. "Only if I can be brave for both of us." He exhaled slowly. "Deal." Fallon appeared from the far end of the room, descending a few steps from the stage where she'd been speaking to a small group of event organizers. She wore a deep navy gown that caught the light like midnight waves, her hair swept back to reveal a pair of delicate silver earrings. But it wasn't the dress or the diamonds that made Orion's heart pound. It was the way her face lit up when she saw them. "You made it," she said, reaching for Piper's hands first. "You look like stardust." Piper beamed. "Daddy says I look like a blueberry cloud." Fallon laughed. "I like that even better." Orion watched her carefully. "Are you sure we belong here?" Fallon stepped closer. "You belong wherever I do." He didn't respond right away, but his hand found the small of her back as she guided them toward a quieter corner of the room. "I thought this would be overwhelming," he said. "It is," Fallon replied, "but it matters. The foundation we're supporting tonight builds housing for single-parent families. I wanted you to see what you're already a part of." He looked around at the glittering crowd. "I never imagined I'd end up at something like this." "You didn't end up here," Fallon corrected. "You were invited." As the evening unfolded, Piper was seated at a special children's table near the stage, supervised by a pair of event staff Fallon had personally vouched for. Orion watched her giggling with two other kids, a tiny crown of flowers tucked into her curls, and turned to Fallon. "I've never seen her look so fearless." "She gets it from you," Fallon said. "No," he murmured. "She gets it from what she survived." Fallon's expression shifted. "Can I ask you something I haven't yet?" Orion nodded once. "What would you do if the past didn't weigh so much?" He hesitated. "I'd start over, somewhere smaller. Maybe run a studio out of a garage again. Take photos because I love them, not because I have to. And if someone wanted to do that with you," he met her eyes, "then I'd have to believe I deserved that kind of future." Fallon drew in a breath. "Then maybe tonight's about more than just charity." Before he could respond, a familiar voice took the stage, a board member Fallon had introduced earlier. He began speaking about the night's cause, thanking donors and contributors. Then, unexpectedly, he gestured toward the crowd. "We were reminded this week of what this mission really means," he said. "Not by a billionaire or a board member, but by a father who showed us that love is the most powerful foundation any home can have." Orion froze. Fallon rose beside him, gently touching his arm. "They asked for a story. I gave them yours." He looked at her, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said, "because you deserve to be seen." The spotlight swung toward their corner. The applause began soft at first, then swelling as people stood. Piper jumped to her feet at her table and waved both hands high in the air, her voice carrying through the room. "That's my daddy." Orion stood slowly, his face unreadable. Fallon reached for his hand again. "You okay?" she whispered. "I don't know," he replied. "But I think I'm ready to find out." After the speech, guests approached them in waves, some to thank him, others to offer support, donations, or simply kind words. Orion handled it all with quiet grace, but his eyes never left Piper for long. Later that night, as the ballroom emptied and the music faded, Fallon led him to a rooftop balcony strung with soft lights. The city spread beneath them in a tapestry of gold. Piper had fallen asleep in a private lounge, curled up in a plush chair with a soft blanket wrapped around her. Fallon leaned against the railing. "I've spent years building a life most people envy, but tonight was the first time I felt like any of it meant something." Orion stood beside her, the wind brushing through his hair. "Because of a photo on the beach," she turned to face him. "Because of how I felt when you took it, like I was worth seeing." He stepped closer. "You were more than worth it." Their faces were inches apart now, the city lights glowing behind them. Fallon didn't move away. "I'm not asking for forever," she said. "Just for a chance to see what happens if we stop pretending we're from different worlds." Orion cupped her face gently. "I don't think we ever were." And then he kissed her softly at first, then with a certainty that had nothing to do with time and everything to do with truth. It wasn't fireworks or violins. It was something deeper, something earned. When they pulled apart, Fallon rested her forehead against his. "So what now? We go home," he said. "We put Piper to bed, and tomorrow we take her to the beach. You, me, and her. No speeches, no gowns. Just sand and sunlight." Fallon smiled, and after that, he grinned. "We figure it out," she nodded slowly. "I can live with that." They stood there for a while longer, watching the city breathe beneath them, two people who had once thought they were too damaged to love again. But as the lights of the gala flickered behind them and the stars blinked awake above, neither of them felt broken anymore. They felt like a beginning. Orion adjusted the canvas backdrop inside the sunlit studio space, a modest building tucked behind the bakery that smelled like warm sugar and cinnamon. The polished hardwood floors gleamed beneath the light streaming through the high windows, and against one wall stood a row of framed photographs, portraits, candid moments, and one large print of Piper laughing barefoot on the beach. Her voice floated in from the front room as she counted buttons from a tin jar. Her babysitter, an elderly woman from the building named Miss Leela, humming softly beside her. Fallon leaned in the doorway, watching as Orion stepped back to assess the lighting. "You hung everything yourself, every nail," he replied. "I even leveled them twice. Piper says I'm obsessed. She's not wrong." Fallon smiled and crossed the room, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "But it's perfect. It feels like you." He turned toward her, the collar of his shirt open, sleeves rolled to his elbows. "Feels like us now." She reached for one of the framed photos, a black and white shot of her holding Piper's hand as they crossed a tide pool. "You captured something in these. Not just light or faces, but intention. That's what I want this place to be," he said. "A space where people can see who they are without needing to pretend." Fallon walked carefully to the center of the room. "And this is really happening." The lease is signed. "The equipment was delivered yesterday. I've got bookings lined up through next month thanks to that feature your media team ran." He paused. "And thanks to you." "I didn't do it for the exposure. I know," he said quietly. "You did it because you believed in me before I did." Fallon turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking about what comes next." Orion tilted his head. "Next, like, next for us." His brow lifted. "You planning another surprise gala?" "No," she said, stepping closer, "but I am planning to step down." He blinked. "From Everett and Chase, I've already appointed a new CEO, someone I trust. I'll retain creative direction, but the day-to-day. I'm done." "You're serious?" "I haven't been this certain in years." Orion took a moment to process it. "What made you decide?" She looked around the studio. You, Piper, I want a life that's rooted in something real, not another boardroom or a press release. I want to wake up and make pancakes without checking stock prices." He crossed the room, his eyes never leaving hers. "You sure you're ready to trade gala gowns for pancake syrup?" "I've already ordered aprons." He chuckled, then sobered. "Are you really okay leaving all that behind?" "I'm not leaving anything behind," she said. "I'm choosing something better." Their hands found each other naturally, fingers weaving like threads. For a moment they just stood there, the quiet hum of the city outside grounding them. "I don't know what this looks like," he admitted. "I've never done forever." "Neither have I," she replied. "But we're not starting from scratch. We've already survived the storms. Now we get to build." Before he could answer, Piper burst through the doorway, her curls bouncing. "Miss Leela said I could show you something." Fallon knelt. "What is it?" Piper opened her small palm to reveal a smooth stone painted with a tiny house and a heart above the roof. "It's a wish stone. I made it at the community center. I wish this would be our real home." Fallon's eyes softened. "And do you think your wish came true?" Piper looked between them. "Are you staying?" Fallon looked up at Orion, then back at Piper. "I'm not going anywhere." Piper grinned. "Then yes." It came true. Later that evening, the three of them walked hand in hand along the beach, the same stretch of sand where it all began. Piper ran ahead to chase the tide, her laughter echoing across the dunes. Orion and Fallon strolled slowly, their shoulders touching. "She's going to remember this," he said. "This feeling?" Fallon nodded. "So will I." He turned to her, his voice low. "You changed my life." She shook her head. "We saved each other." He let the words settle, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a delicate silver band. No diamonds, no spectacle, just a quiet, unspoken promise. Fallon stared at it, her breath catching. "I don't want a grand stage," he said. "I want this, you, Piper, us. Every morning, every night. Will you marry me?" She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. "Yes." They stood in the fading light, the waves brushing the shore as he slid the ring onto her finger. Piper ran back toward them, squealing when she saw the ring. "Does this mean we're a real family now?" Orion lifted her into his arms. "We always were." A few months later, under a canopy of twinkle lights in the backyard of their new home, a modest cottage just blocks from the studio, they exchanged vows with Piper standing proudly between them as flower girl and ring bearer. Fallon wore a simple dress. Orion's tie was slightly crooked, and none of it mattered. They danced barefoot on the grass, laughed until their cheeks ached. And when the last guest had gone and Piper had fallen asleep beside a half-eaten cupcake, Orion carried her inside while Fallon turned off the lights. They stood in the kitchen, the scent of lavender and lemon still lingering from the wedding cake. Fallon leaned against the counter, watching him tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I never thought I'd find peace in quiet," he kissed her temple. "I never thought I'd find home in someone's eyes." They didn't need promises. They'd already lived them, and as the night settled around their little house, filled with laughter and light and the soft breathing of a sleeping child, they finally let go of who they'd been. Together, they stepped fully into who they were always meant to become, a family. Fully, finally, forever.